Since COVID, I've noticed more and more people wanting to grow high quality nutrient dense foods themselves, but without really knowing where to begin. I'm Luke with Regenerative Fruit Growers, and before I even plant a single tree, here is the framework that I use for creating any regenerative farm ecosystem. 1, climate. Climate is the master variable and is the first thing that I assess. Everything else builds from there. So I start by collecting historical climate data for the site, and the data points that I want to find will differ depending on what part of the world I'm in. For Western Montana, so right where I'm at right now, the first data point is look for the minimum extreme winter low. I don't want to look at what zone I'm in because all this does is take 30 years of minimum extreme winter low data and it averages them together. What I'll do is I'll research the absolute coldest temperature a site has seen, and then I'll want to find data on early fall frosts. What's the coldest it has been, the earliest in the fall? Then I'll find other data points like false spring risk, which are those warm spells in February or March that break dormancy. And then I'll also see the length of the growing season, growing degree days, and heat units. So all those things determine if a fruit can ripen in a given climate, etc. This isn't an exhaustive list, but this gets me started if the site is located at least here in Western Montana, for example. 2, land shape. So after assessing the climate, the next thing, regardless of the site, that I'll always assess when doing any farm planning and design is land shape and topography. Because cold air, like water, flows downhill. I've seen orchards lose an entire crop to a May frost, while trees just 10 feet higher in elevation were just fine. So whenever analyzing topography, I'll always start by using QGIS, which I like because it's free and it's open source. The first thing that I'll do in QGIS is create a digital elevation model of the site. And then I'll do slope and aspect analyses next and cold air drainage mapping. They may not always be in that order, but those are generally the first things that I'll do. These things can be super useful for getting a good grasp on the topography and how water and frost interact with the land shape, which will really help me with the water design. Which brings me to next, 3, water. So after assessing climate and land shape, the next thing that I assess is water. Water is the most limiting input, especially here in Western Montana, for most farm systems and is often the most poorly designed and managed. I start by mapping water sources. Is there a well? Where's it located? A spring? Maybe there's a seasonal stream? Where is it located with respect to the shape of the land? And where does water go when it hits the land? I've helped clients harvest and store water high on the landscape that would have otherwise quickly infiltrated into the ground. And I've also done systems that take water from a pond and gravity feed it across a terrace of fruit trees slightly off contour. But in either of those cases, I arrived at using those water techniques by having a good understanding of first that climate, then followed by the land shape, and then I was guided by certain principles, water principles in this case, like Keyline design, which I'll link to in the show notes. The fourth thing is access. So after climate, land shape, and water, the next thing to analyze is access. Whenever I'm looking at access, I first start with the question, what does movement of people, materials, and resources look like on the land? And since roads, trails, tracks, etc. act as thoroughfares that facilitate movement, getting clear on where to place them or where to redirect them is extremely important. I've seen way too many roads cut too early in the design process without really understanding how water moves. Those roads become trenches for runoff, leading to erosion and water loss. Instead, what I'll do is I guide roads and paths first using contour and ridge alignment, watershed and runoff mapping, and infiltration zone overlays to tell me where the best spots would be for them. And then I tailor the specific goals, resource flows of the client, and other relevant factors that involve movement to decide their ultimate locations. Number 5. Once I've assessed climate, land shape, water, and access, the next design elements, plants, soils, buildings, and fences must be considered in context, not in isolation from one another. While frameworks like Regenerative, Keyline, and the permaculture scale differ in terms of what comes after access, they all emphasize some variation of these core components. Their order often reflects perceived permanence, so soil is commonly placed last as it's less permanent than buildings or other infrastructure. But unlike buildings, soils can be improved rapidly and should be evaluated before planting. Likewise, fencing may be less permanent, but its placement can influence the plant's layout and animal management strategies. Ultimately, rather than staying to a rigid framework, effective planning requires integrated decision-making based on a site's goals, constraints, and long-term vision. I'll always return to the client's holistic context to guide the timing and prioritization of each element. So whether you're wanting to build a backyard food forest, a homestead orchard, or a full farm scale system, allow for everything discussed here to help guide your framework. Now let's get after it. Let's plant some trees, let's regenerate the land, and let's create food abundance.